Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. The title of the present paper is Building a Literature Review on Emergency Remote Learning during COVID-19 through the lens of European regulations. This is a topic of particular interest to those of you who are in the field of teaching and learning, and I think today we all are in this Future of Education conference. But also to those of you who find relevant the discussion on distance education during the pandemic. My name is Simona Scanni, and I'm a PhD student of Italian Studies at the University of Birmingham. Let me say just a few words about my background and my research. So the present paper is extracted from my research, my PhD thesis, and the title is Effectiveness of Online Language Learning, a Case Study of Italian as a Foreign Language. So we all know that after COVID-19, we had like a sort of unexpected shift from proximate to distance learning after the pandemic. And the temporary closures of schools and institutions which according to UNESCO affected more than 1.5 billion students in about 188 countries, has raised attention on online learning. My research is divided into two parts: online learning before COVID-19 and online learning after COVID-19. And I will explain why in a few slides. So these are the contents of my presentation. First, I'm going to list the research objectives of my paper, and then the literature review through the European regulations, actions and reports, and then the conclusions. The aim of this paper is to explore and discuss theoretical approaches on the impact of COVID-19 on education, with the intention of building a literature review on COVID-19 and emergency remote learning in 2020. This can serve as a contribution in the research field and allows a critical evaluation and analysis of the last 2 years of pandemic and the near future. The study also represents one of the first contributions to the discussion about COVID-19 and emergency remote learning through the lens of European regulations. The collection and presentations of sources from existing literature and articles, evidence from recent international documents, such as recommendations, regulations, and guidelines, then technical reports and opinions on the topic will provide a better understanding on how the pandemic has affected education and training. I will say just a few words about this new terminology, which emerged after the COVID-19 outbreak. So before COVID-19, there was online learning. So what is happening is that people back then could freely choose to learn and study online, depending on many factors, like such as their personality, autonomy, learning, educational and academic needs. But after the COVID-19 outbreak, all students and teachers moved to online learning to avoid education disruption. So it is worth noticing that this transition to online learning from March 2020 is not to be regarded as online learning per se, because online learning has always been an alternative to face-to-face and classroom-based learning, but now it is a necessity. It's a temporary need to avoid the education disruption. So it is something to consider when we talk about online or distance learning during the pandemic. So we talk about emergency remote learning. So The European Union has promptly contributed to the discussion on COVID-19 and education through many reports and documents we're going to see later. Um, so the COVID-19 crisis and the consequential temporary physical closures of schools and institutions have posed many new challenges for the European Union and for all stakeholders involved. In 2006, the European Union already recognized the importance of developing digital competencies in learning among 8 key competencies in education and training systems, which students should acquire by the end of compulsory education, to a level that equips them for adult life and which forms a basis for further learning and working life. However, learners cannot acquire digital skills if not supported by well-digitalized environments and competent educators. That are really important turning point. So the picture was then upgraded in 2013 when the Joint Research Centre, a service which supports the European Commission, first published the European Digital Competence Framework, a tool to improve citizens' digital competence, then updated in 2016, along with the publication of the European Framework for the Digital Competence of Educators, which reflected European states' awareness about the need for educators to improve their digital competencies in order to enhance and innovate their teaching practices. The COVID-19 emergency has brought new issues to light, which have been addressed in the second Digital Education Action Plan. The first was adopted in 2018, which covers the years 2021-2027. The action plan contains measures and policies which aim at making digital education training more inclusive and effective through 2 priorities: fostering the development of a high-performing digital education ecosystem and enhancing digital skills and competencies of teachers and learners. It sets out to support member states in adapting and transforming their education training systems to the digital age. It is obvious that such transformation will not happen right away, but the awareness at European level shows how educational challenges and opportunities of the pandemic are acknowledged by international and national institutions and set to be tackled. These are some European reports and documents that I have included in my presentation. And in particular, these are reports and documents delivered by agencies and centers which collaborate with the European Union policies through providing data, reports, and evidence. The COVID Let's say that despite the measures and efforts of the European institutions in taking action against the COVID-19 crisis in order to avoid or limit the disruption to education, the published reports and studies have generally shown pessimistic outcome concerning the future of education and the impact of the pandemic on students' learning. Although distance learning offers advantages in terms of time and space flexibility, innovation and teaching practices, and source accessibility. Such a rush to switch education from in-person to online mode surely had a psychological repercussion on the perception of distance learning and its benefits. The findings show that the physical closure and the consequential switch to online learning resulted in less amount of time spent on learning remotely, the reduction of physical interaction among students, and the lack of extrinsic motivation, disengagement in learning, which cause a learning loss, especially among younger students and students with special needs and disabilities who need the support and supervision of educators. Learning loss means a general loss of knowledge and skills. Moreover, the socioeconomic status play a role in students' achievement. Um, students from yes, so students from less advantaged backgrounds are likely to experience a larger decline in learning. A good home learning environment, parents who can support their children because they have the knowledge and skills to help them, proper access to internet connection and devices. These are all elements that can really make a difference. The family socioeconomic context and background can influence children's learning. Besides the limitation, the COVID-19 crisis also provides opportunities to implement technology, digital skills, to rethink and renew higher education by adopting creative and innovative approaches to online learning and virtual mobility, such as internationalization at home. In summary, we have talked about the limitations of emergency remote teaching, which also represent challenges for educators, staff, and stakeholders. Distance education has been seen as a solution to avoid a disruption of the education system. We should think of the pandemic as an opportunity to reconsider the future of education, to modernize the curricula, and to innovate learning methods with a focus on digitalization. The emergency remote teaching as a panacea for temporary state does not reproduce the same favorable circumstances of an online teaching context in a non-emergency situation. Online learning surely puts some advantages and opportunities on the table. Education can be accessible for all regardless geographical location, and students can self-regulate their learning and study at their own pace. Learning online from home can decrease costs in terms of infrastructure and many personal expenses, such as travel costs. We should think of new delivery modes, such as hybrid and blended and face-to-face remote and remote learning. And we'll have to continue and to do further research on inclusion. But also we always have to bear in mind that there is a difference between distance education and emergency remote teaching. That's conclude my presentation. Thank you for your attention.